Thanks, Joe. Thanks for that introduction. Okay, where to stand with lights out of my eyes? Okay, this is good. Thank you all for coming today. Thanks to Peter, Shane, and the whole PBC crew for having me down here. I was here in July of last year and had a great time. It rained most of the time. And they said, oh, Ryne, would you like to come back? I said, yeah, 2024 sounds good. So here I am. So happy to be here. It's a long flight, but once you're here, it is really good to be here. So I'm going to talk a little bit today about leadership and ambition. And I think this is a topic that, as you'll see, I think a lot of people have missed, and it's something that I think really adds a lot of value. There's something that Hogan brings that adds a lot of value when we're trying to understand leadership in the workplace. So this is the overview. This is just what I'm going to cover today, and that's enough of that. Bob Hogan and I talk all the time, and one of the things we talk about all the time is leadership, and this is sort of what we think. Leadership is the most important problem. The way we talk about it, we say the fundamental question in human affairs is who shall rule? Meaning that when you have the right person in charge, really good things happen. Organizations thrive, nations thrive. The individuals in those organizations and nations are successful. Shareholder prices, right? The value for shareholders go up. Individuals keep their jobs. And nations and economies are productive. When bad leadership is in place, really bad things happen. Organizations fail, nations fail, people lose their jobs, shareholder value plummets. Most recently, just last week, a colleague of mine sent me a paper studying Chilean hospitals, studying the mortality rate in a whole bunch of hospitals in Chile. And they found that the CEO accounted for 8% of the variability in mortality rate. Just who's in charge of the hospital has consequences for whether or not patients live or die. These aren't even the people operating on the patients. So who's in charge really matters. What do we know about personality and leadership? We know that personality predicts who leads, and it also predicts how people lead. In terms of the who leads question, one of the biggest predictors of who leads is a personality trait called ambition. And I'll show you that here. This is from our global executive data. We have a lot of data at Hogan. We collect data we have data from every country except 4. Don't ask me to name the 4. I can't remember all 4 of them. So we have data from all over the world on executives, on leaders. And this is what global executives look like. Notice, ambition is the one that really stands out here. An average score of 62 among executives. What does that mean? Does that mean to be a good executive you need to be high ambition? No. Right? Let's not confuse the distinction between leadership emergence and leadership effectiveness. But it does mean people who get into these leadership positions are ambitious, for better or worse. The point here is ambition has consequences for who's in charge. That's also true in Australia, by the way, just in case you were curious. It's even stronger, right? 65. Despite the fact that ambition is one of the critical drivers of who gets to be in charge, I'm going to argue that it's largely ignored. It's ignored by at least 2 groups of people. One is the psychologists of old, right, the psychoanalysts. So Freud referred to people who are ambitious as neurotic father murderers. What was ambition about? Ambition is about being mad that your mom loves your dad and wanting to get back at your dad. Okay. For Jung, it meant you were suffering from a regressive restoration of the persona. I'm not quite sure what that means. And for adults, popular, it was a neurotic defense against low self-esteem, right? So you have low self-esteem, so you just said, that's it, I'm going to show you people, and I'm going to be really ambitious and status-seeking. In popular culture, what does the popular culture have to say about ambition? A little bit. We see in the 17th through 19th centuries, Americans, right? This is other countries' popular culture in newspapers, magazines, articles. Americans were seen as having dangerous territorial ambitions. I mean, that turned out to be true. There is a little bit of academic research. Some research suggests that if you're ambitious, people don't trust you, particularly in politics. People don't trust ambitious politicians. They see them as lacking trust. The one I think about is the Pope. Can you imagine how hard that is to be the Pope? First of all, it's one job, right? There's only one person gets the job. And you have to be unbelievably ambitious, right, to get that one job. But you can't let anyone know that you want it because they want to pick the most humble, right? Good luck getting that job. We've also known from some research, and this is research that Dr. Hogan was involved in, that it's a problem for job incumbents, right? If there's no room for growth in your job, ambitious people tend to become toxic. They become problematic workers if they feel like they can't move ahead. But other than that, we really don't know a lot, and this is also true if we look at psychology, a more modern view of psychology broadly. So you can look up in the dictionary, right? This is what it says about ambition. Desire to be successful, powerful, or famous. That seems reasonable. But when we started getting onto this topic some years ago, I actually walked down to the university library. Many of you are familiar with this activity, but there's some people that don't know what that means. But yeah, I walked down there and the APA dictionary, opened it up, said, I'm going to find out what the American Psychological Association has to say about ambition. I go and I put my finger down to find the term ambition. That's what we found. No entry. It's also true that ambition is ignored by mainstream personality psychologists. I'm a personality psychologist by training. There's about 500 of us in the world. There aren't very many of us. We sometimes go to meetings together. You can't find ambition in the most popular personality models. How many people have heard of the Big Five? And the Hexaco? Maybe, okay. So these are the two most popular models of personality that academics talk about. The Big Five, the Hexaco. Neither of them include ambition, even in the facets. But these models are supposed to be comprehensive. They're supposed to be covering the entire landscape of what we know about people. So I thought that was problematic. My graduate student and I thought, well, wait a minute, this is strange. These models are supposed to be comprehensive. Where's ambition? Now, the HPI, as you all know, right? Everybody here knows the HPI? Okay. Includes a measure of ambition. So we thought, okay, great. Let's see how these Big Five or the Hexaco measures might somehow capture ambition. Let's see if ambition's in there at all. And so what we did was we got a sample of adults from a community in Oregon. We had some of them complete the HPI, some completed the NEOPI, which is a Big Five measure, some completed the Hexaco, which is a 6-factor measure. And you can see the correlations here. Maybe they might be a little low for some of you, but the point here is that extroversion, conscientiousness, and neuroticism seem to have reasonably sized correlations with ambition, but they're not overlapping. It's not perfectly over. If they were the same thing, we'd see around 0.8. Okay, this is around 0.5. With the Hexaco, we find similar pattern: emotionality, which is their version of neuroticism, extroversion, and conscientiousness. So when people see this, they go, aha. Isn't ambition just a combination of those 2 or 3 things? Isn't it just extroversion and conscientiousness? Or isn't it just extroversion, conscientiousness, and neuroticism? Well, that's what we thought to dig a little deeper to find out. So we actually used some machine learning techniques, and we said, let's go to the facets, and let's let the facets predict ambition. Let's build a model. Let's see how well we can actually recreate ambition from a Big Five measure. And you don't have to worry too much about the details on this, but the point here is this. There's a R equals 0.77, which is pretty good. That means we can capture ambition pretty well with machine learning built algorithm. Also true in the Hexaco was 0.77 as well. So we can capture ambition with these measures. But what does it require? It requires some pretty complicated algorithms. These are the algorithms. These are the weights that you have to put together to get ambition out of the NEO. These are the weights you have to put together to get ambition out of the hexaco. Now, some of them seem more important, right? Impulsiveness comes from neuroticism, assertiveness comes from extroversion, achievement striving comes from conscientiousness. But what's interesting is that if you include other parts of conscientiousness in the model, it gets worse, right? So ambition is made up of all these little parts, little hints of it in different items in the NEO. Same thing with the hexaco. So what's the conclusion about all of this? Bob Hogan worries that people won't understand what I'm talking about, so I'm trying to take a moment here to explain what this means. What does this really mean? This means that ambition is kind of in these measures, but it's totally obscured. There's no single scale that captures ambition. All right, now, given that we know ambition's important, that seems like a misstep, right? We know ambition predicts getting into executive roles, and executives have a lot of control over our lives. That seems like a misstep. So we went a little further. We said, okay, if ambition is really different from extroversion, because again, some people say to me, oh, ambition, isn't that just extroversion, or isn't that just extroversion plus conscientiousness? If it's really different, it ought to predict different things. So that's what I'm going to show you here, is some analyses we did with our friends at PBC, who shared some data with us, predicting behavior as rated by your work colleagues from ambition and sociability, which is our measure of extroversion in the HPI. And we're also going to be predicting it from ambition and prudence, which is our measure of conscientiousness in the HPI. So we've got a lot of data. Again, thanks to PBC for sharing this with us. We've got about 13 raters per person in the sample. So we've got pretty reliable information about what people are like and how they behave. The numbers are here for the nerd inclined, myself included. But what's much more important is this list of items here. So what we have here is how ambitious people are seen relative to sociable people. Okay? So let's just look. Ambitious people are seen as more, right? More likely to use goals and performance to improve. To be hardworking, have a good work ethic, to have a passion to make the difference, set long-term goals, be competitive and driven. This is what ambitious people look like compared to sociable people. And the other side is this. This is what sociable people look like compared to ambitious people. So the point here, this is extroversion. Having people skills, building relationships, right? That's what extroversion's about. Look what ambition's about. Working hard, getting ahead. This is with prudence. Look at ambitious people. Driven, assertive, energetic, have the passion to make a difference, have influence and negotiating skills. Now let's compare to prudent people. They're polite and considerate. They avoid double standards. They treat people with respect. Now, to me, these look like very different people, right? I look at this, I go, okay, I see what this person's like. I look at this, I go, okay, what's this person like? They seem both productive, both good things to have at work, but very different. So we did the same thing on work performance. We said, okay, what about workplace performance? Can we predict workplace performance with ambition and sociability? What are the differences? What do ambitious people look like? So this is, let me just mention a little bit about our performance archive. So we have a lot of data, performance data. We have performance data on basically every job in the US economy and most jobs in the global economy. We have a whole bunch of performance variables that we measure in those studies, not just overall performance. So that's the basic question, is how are these things differentially related to job performance? What do ambitious people look like on the job? This is what their supervisors say about them, that they compete with others, that they negotiate, they display confidence, they stay alert, they overcome obstacles, that are politically savvy. Right? Some of these things you might say are good, some of these things you may not say are so good, right? Competing with others can be good, but it can also be bad in certain circumstances, right? So it's not a judgment call about whether it's good or bad. just that this is what ambitious people do. And this is what sociable people do. They present to others, they delegate, they're good at written communication. And by the way, they're really bad at a whole bunch of things. Quality focus, safety focus, time management. I mean, if you spend a lot of your time just talking with other people, you probably don't get a lot of other stuff done. And then finally, prudence. Let's see what the prudent people look. Staying alert, organizational citizenship, quality focus. It's just a very different set of outcomes. And I see lots of cameras coming up. I can tell you want to get photos of me, but I'm pretty sure the PBC group is going to share the slides with everybody at the end. Yeah, okay. It's okay, you can still take the photos because I know you want me in it. If you want me to pose or anything, I can do that. So again, Bob Hogan worries that I go on these talks, and I said, Bob, these are all really smart people. They get it. He said, no, you got to be really clear about what you're saying. So this is my point. Most personality tests obscure ambition. The most popular personality test in the world, the Big Five, Hexaco, which is most widely used, obscure ambition, right? We saw that. You can find it in there, but you have to have this right combination of very strange weights to get it out. So it's not that it doesn't exist in those measures, but it's obscured. Now, we can speculate about why that is. I'm a recovering academic myself, so I'm pretty familiar with academics, and they're not very ambitious as a bunch. So I don't know. That's part of my speculation about why ambition doesn't show up there. They don't quite understand it, I think, maybe. A couple of other points to take home here. One, conscientiousness is about following the rules. Which I want to point out, following the rules is about what? What's the sort of big goal of following the rules? What are we trying to do by following the rules? We are trying to get along with other people, right? At Hogan, we talk about two master motives. One is about getting ahead, the other is about getting along. From about the time you're like 4 years old, 5 years old, once you get into school with other kids, that's when the race starts. There's two big competitions. One is building friends and networks, getting along with other kids, and the other is getting ahead and figuring out who's the best, who's the strongest, who's the biggest, who's the fastest, who's the smartest, who's the best student. Right, that's those competitions, and that goes on through to maybe like college, maybe not, maybe it's still going on, I don't know. But the point is that competition starts, right? And conscientiousness is part of that competition, and that's about following the rules. That's about getting along. Extroversion is about talking a lot, which is also about getting along. Right? It's about making friends. It's about networking. It's about building relationships. Oops, sorry. But ambition is about upward mobility, right? Ambition is about getting ahead. So the point is, if you use a Big Five measure, you are mashing together these fundamental motives. The beauty of a measure like the HPI, like what we use at Hogan, is that we pull those apart. We say ambition is about getting ahead, and we can measure that, and we can see who's more likely to be in the executive role, whereas prudence or conscientiousness and sociability or extroversion are about getting along. Okay, so 3 points to wrap up here. Number one, you just can't measure ambition with extroversion and conscientiousness. If you try to put them together, you end up mucking it up. Practitioners, like many of you folks, you ought to be interested in ambition. Ambition has really clear consequences, for better or for worse. Peter's going to talk about a lot of ways that it's better, but there's also plenty of ways in which it's worse. But you ought to be interested in that, because there's real consequences of ambition. And if you have a measure that doesn't have ambition, you're going to miss that. And this is just for my academic friends who aren't here. If we keep ignoring ambition, we can continue to exist in irrelevance. Thanks so much. How am I doing? Are you okay?
Okay, thanks, Ryne. We'll probably have time for maybe one question, but I'm going to start us off. Ryne, when we're selecting people potentially at lower levels in organisations, with the conscientiousness or in Friday language prudence. How does that correlate with ambition? So should we be selecting people, when we're thinking about our leadership pipeline, should we be selecting people who have both prudence and ambition, or are they inversely correlated?
Yeah, so Peter actually, I think in his slides, maybe actually at the masterclass slides, does have the correlation matrix in there, which it does have the correlation between ambition and prudence, and I think it's around 0.1, something like that. But don't quote. Man, for stuff like this, I got to go to the technical manual and refer to that. But I think it's around there. So it's a relatively small correlation between those two. What I would say is it really depends on the role. It depends on what you're trying to do. In development contexts, and I don't want to steal Peter's thunder because I know he's going to talk about this, we do know that among top-level leaders, they tend to be a little bit lower on prudence. And I think what happens in a lot of organizations, some of your best employees are high prudence. They're very organized, they're very diligent, they follow the rules, they get things done, they're hardworking, they're motivated, they focus on quality, they deliver big projects. But in a leadership role where you've got 40, 80, 200 reports, you just can't be, you can't do everything, right? You can't do it all yourself. And so for a lot of people transitioning into those roles, that is an area that they need to work on. They need to work on being able to delegate more.
Okay, I think we have time maybe for one or two questions. Anybody like to kick us off? You're going to make me come right down the end of the room. Okay, hello.
I don't want to steal.
No, please introduce yourself.
Oh, sorry, I'm
Yeah.
Jackie Sliger. I'm a clinical and organizational psychologist.
Okay.
Cross-cultural, so I do international stuff. Look, my concern about what you're saying to an audience of people that in Australia that will see ambition, I think we have to be very careful about how we couch ambition. And I say that because I coach narcissists.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them would be happy as Larry to say that they were ambitious and all the rest of it. And they are a danger, really, to many industries. I'm not going to say to all industries. I mean, you'll find them in investment banking very happily. But I think that you have to be really careful.
Yeah, well, and that is why I tried to point out a couple of times. One, I think you have to be clear on the distinction between leadership emergence and leadership effectiveness. What I'm saying is it's very clear. Ambition predicts leadership emergence really well. Who's going to get to the top of the organization? People who are ambitious. They're going to get there, for better or for worse, right? In some cases, it is worse, right? And the examples that you give are perfect ones. So I totally agree. There's absolutely a dark side to ambition. We have data on that too, showing problems. Look, in an earlier version of this deck where I cut it down a little bit, I show a whole bunch of people that were ruthlessly ambitious. Some of them lead countries right now that are at war with other countries, right? So, yeah, there's definitely a dark side to ambition. That's right.
Okay, and one more very quick question. Hello.
Hi, I'm Catherine Anderson. I work for Boston construction and stuff. Where's the room for introversion in leadership? Because I can remember reading data that actually, if you look at leaders that add value to their companies, most often they're introverts because they listen to others. So where is that?
Yeah, so again, I in a separate talk about leadership effectiveness, where we'll be talking about some different kinds of things, right? This is really focused on what happens if you ignore ambition. I think the data are pretty clear that you can be an effective leader whether you're introverted or extroverted. Doesn't really matter in terms of leadership effectiveness. What matters in terms of leadership effectiveness tends to be your ability to adapt to the circumstances, to say this is what our company needs right now. And if you're extroverted or you're very talkative or you're very attention-seeking, you need to recognize the moments where it's important for you to do that and the moments where it's important for you to give credit to somebody else, right? And that's what really effective leaders do, is they are able to recognize when their own strengths are not the right answer, right? What we find is that bad leaders, poor leaders who are not effective, can only operate in one mode. And their strength, and they go to their strength, they go to their strengths all day long, And when that's the wrong thing to do, it leads to a disaster. So absolutely, there's room for introversion in leadership effectiveness. When it comes to emergence, though, introverts are very likely to get skipped over. That's why you have to use assessments.